Hi, I'm Donald Kronos. Before I even begin, I want to point out something very important. YouTube gives people a choice of voting in favor of or opposition to a video, a comment, or a reply. This would be a good thing if it was only used to represent how people feel about what they're rating or voting on. Unfortunately, anything with a few more negative votes than positive votes is hidden, keeping it from gaining more positive votes once it reaches that stage. There are people who choose to abuse this feature to hide anything they don't want seen. Plenty of very informative content is hidden from the public in this way, severely reducing the value of time spent on YouTube. With that in mind, please click the thumbs up button for this video if you feel that it may be good for people to see, before those who would hide what it has to say can manage to do so. In fact, it's not a bad idea to click the thumbs up button on everything you think would be good for people to see, because under the current system, at the time I'm making this video, negative and positive votes on YouTube are not equal opposites. Negative votes have the power to hide one side of a discussion. Positive votes do not. This is not the same thing. It's not a balanced voting system, and it's not something I would advocate. I hope YouTube will someday separate requests to hide potentially offensive content from simple rating of contents as liked or disliked. In the meantime, keep an eye out for the ways they have provided to see otherwise hidden content, and if you like it, click the thumbs up button to have your opinion counted. Perhaps some of it might even get unhidden if enough people manage to find it. Now, I would like to attempt to explain from my own point of view how most of the mystery can be taken out of such things as the spirit realm, the origin of the universe as we know it, and the origin of life, both as we know it and otherwise. Or you can just take God's word for it. Except that when God talks to people, it tends to drive them crazy. But it's okay though, because the crazy people wrote it all down, so the rest of us can just read one of their books and take the crazy person's word for it. Call it God's word and not have to go insane. That's always an option. Not everybody's comfortable with it, but those that are probably aren't ready to take the blinders off just yet. Anyway, I want to touch on politics before going any further, because there's a connection between politics and religion which goes way back to when church and state were basically the same thing. History is my worst subject, so don't expect me to get into detail or even to get it all right. But my understanding is that in some places, the ruling people were actually considered gods. Well, in other places, the gods supposedly appointed or endorsed the human rulers. Of course, this second arrangement had an advantage. If things didn't go well, the gods got the blame, and new ones were assigned to take their place. Well, the government was generally held completely blameless, since nobody could expect them to do well under bad gods. No, that's not what the official government endorsed historians told us, is it? I can imagine that didn't work very well regardless. People could see their governments were really in control, couldn't they? Besides, any magician could just come along and demonstrate a more powerful looking god on his side and get to be the new king. Something like that. Of course, there's always the possibility that the pharaoh who was said to be God wasn't really in charge at all, but rather got to live a lavish lifestyle and be revered as God in return for being the inevitable scapegoat in the event of a rebellion. Since history can be altered and can even contain lies in the first place, we'll probably never really know. Sorry, but I can't take the mystery out of history. These days, religion has taken over in various ways. What you talking about? The global shift seems to be toward the types of systems they have in bigger countries, where the real leaders hide outside of government. In fact, Those who run our politicians like a puppet show have been waging wars in certain resource rich locations to replace the system of government in these smaller countries they don't control with a so called democracy that they can eventually pick their own puppets to run. Many of those who really run things actually think of themselves as gods, but hide the fact that they're telling governments what to do. Like the old Greek gods on Mount Olympus, such gods realize that their powers are limited. They know a small group of us could defeat them if we could just find where they're hiding. So they hold secretive meetings to discuss the most effective ways to rule over us. They plan the new order of our world and the steps to get us there as if we're just another perishable resource to manage. Those actually seen as having the most power in government are replaced like clockwork to diffuse the anger that builds up over time. This allows people to think that the source of the problem is being replaced by something they personally helped to choose.
That's why I always vote for someone who can't win. At least then the winner isn't my fault. Now, if we had instant runoff voting, or better yet, approval voting, I could vote for a second choice that couldn't win too.
Hmm. Now let's see how this works in a best case scenario proportional representation. Well, okay, maybe it's not the best, but it's better than some of the alternatives. Imagine you're with a group of people who've worked really hard on behalf of some super rich family who promised pizza as a reward. Now that the work is done, you're told that everyone's going to get a single thin slice of pizza, regardless of how hungry anyone may be, and that everyone will be getting exactly the same kind of pizza so that nobody has to feel they were treated unfairly. You're told that the toppings will be chosen democratically so that everyone will be happy with their reward. Of course, the pizza will have a crust, sauce, and cheese. It's obvious this reward wasn't meant for vegans, so we'll just ignore them for now since they're obviously not in the voting majority.
Way to be democratic. Not.
Then there are the vegetarians, who are a little concerned because so many of the workers are talking about how much they like pepperoni. They're quite sure that even if they could all agree on the same vegetarian topping, which they can't, they still wouldn't outnumber those who obviously want pepperoni. So they start fighting for the vegetarians to get their own separate vote for their own separate pizza. Then it's explained to everyone that they don't have to decide on a single topping. All the pizzas will have the three most popular toppings in proportion to the percentage of people who voted for each of those toppings. In fact, to the delight of the vegetarians, you're all told that pepperoni won't even be one of the available choices.
Like I said, not.
You're then told that the choice of toppings you can vote for are as follows: moldy bread, dog hair, rotten birch bark, charcoal, and chicken bones. The vote goes through and the most popular three toppings are chosen. Nobody's happy, but you're all told it's okay because after work tomorrow, you'll get to vote on a different combination of toppings.
Now, wouldn't it have been so much better if you were just given the choice of two toppings to pick between?
You mean two toppings nobody wanted, chosen in a way similar to how those three toppings were picked?
Sure, why not? Pick one and claim to endorse it, so you don't have to get stuck with the other.
Here in the United States of America, we're given a choice between candidates for two heads of a political party owned and controlled by the same rich elite who consider themselves our God, individually or collectively.
Legally, they're not really the same party. Realistically, they are, but they don't actually call them that.
We're told that if we join one head of that political party and claim to support it, we can help narrow down everyone else's options. We're told that if we don't claim to support one bad choice, we're likely to get stuck with a worse one. We're denied any right to leave an official record of opposition or even to have our collective opposition counted. Instead, we're told that supporting one head is opposing the other.
Like I said, that's why I vote for someone who can't win. It's better than not voting or voting for someone you don't want.
Of course, any of us can choose not to give a false endorsement, but we're warned that others will then endorse a worse choice on our behalf, and we'll have to treat their choice as our choice until the next election comes along and we're once again coerced into electing people we don't want into positions with a long history of doing more harm than good.
That's so messed up.
Just once, I would love to see a huge nationwide protest against both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party here in the USA. Not to say that they would necessarily be replaced with anything better, but that's not the point. I'd love to see a huge protest with people standing side by side, holding up signs that say things like pro-democratic republic, anti-democratic party, or against the Democratic Party, not its members. Maybe even a few like pro-liberty, anti-libertarian, for those that wish to express such sentiments. But I don't see any reason why a person shouldn't be able to hold up a single sign that says, I'm against the Democratic Party and I'm against the Republican Party. And I'm a member of one of them because I'm scared to death of the other. These are real feelings people have. I've done surveys, I've asked people. This is real out there. People don't support these parties. They pretend to support them to the extent that they have to reduce the amount of damage they see potentially getting done. So yeah, just once, I would love to see an anti-democratic party, anti-republican party protest in this country.
Do you really think once is enough?
Well, once would be a good start. The point being that the names of the parties are deceptive, and the actual support for those we're threatened with every election is far outweighed by the actual opposition to them, which our elections themselves leave us no way to express. Perhaps, if we could just have one protest against both of them, where people who usually vote for one or the other stand up with people who usually vote against their choice and say, I'm against my party almost as much as I'm against their party. Here's my sign, read it. I'm not supporting these people. I'm voting to protect myself. This is what people do. And yet it looks like an endorsement when the whole thing is over. If we could just get people to stand up and say, we deserve the right to vote against someone, perhaps then people might finally demand as much of a right to express their opposition to a candidate or party as they are currently given to express what gets counted as support for that party or candidate. If it's not really support, it shouldn't have to be expressed as support. And the person who has a strong feeling against a party or a candidate winning in a particular election should not have to choose between claiming to support someone else they think can beat that person voting for someone they know can't possibly win and not voting at all. That's not a choice. That's not fair. We just need the right to say no. And how would this help the good candidates who can't win? It would allow sufficient direct opposition to any well-known candidate to compensate for some of the votes given to that candidate just for being well-known. And it would also allow some of the false positive votes, which usually flood our elections, to be cast as true anti-votes instead, making the real race between the most wanted candidates rather than between the most feared and hated candidates or the most highly publicized candidates. In fact, it would then become more beneficial for a candidate to tell us what good they can do than to tell us what harm their opponent can do. Sure, they're still going to tell us what harm their opponent can do, but at least they wouldn't have to concentrate on just that. I mean, don't you get tired of this? Hey, you should vote for me because he's terrible? The lesser evil is still evil. Oh, lost my light. I wonder what just happened. So, how does this tie in with spirituality? Are we going to vote in a less violent God for people to blame their wars on? Look, I don't personally have all of the answers. I'm just a human being. Nor do I expect to be able to learn all of the answers within my lifetime. But by learning to make some limited use of the natural extension of my mind beyond my own brain into what I call the societal brain, I feel that I have become aware of scientifically testable aspects of our reality which have been evolving in humanity's unconscious mind for countless generations. I've done my best to test what I personally have the ability to of such knowledge and to refine my understanding based on the results. Much of it seems to be known to the general public only in distorted forms. It seems that such information has been intentionally shrouded in mystery by those elite conscious pockets of society which have ruled over the rest of us like gods for many thousands of years in various ways. In fact, many of those highest in their ranks likely believe themselves to be gods. And back when such people were the visible heads of government, before they learned to use figureheads as scapegoats, some even openly called themselves gods, or the equivalent in the language of their particular place and time. In fact, by some definitions, such secret societies which rule over our own societies actually are gods. But that does not make them all-knowing or all-powerful, and it certainly doesn't make them good. In fact, I would say that by certain definitions, it makes them bad gods. In a sense, devils. Or demons, if you want to call it that. They are definitely spiritual beings. I'm not saying they don't have bodies. They certainly have bodies. But a spiritual being isn't limited to one body. This is one of the, in my opinion, lies we've been told. That you have a spirit that lives all trapped in your body until you die, and then it gets out. Well, how does it get out? And where does it go? Well, we're told that it goes to another realm, or by some religions we're told that it goes into another body. Where's the evidence for this? I would like to talk about things that there are evidence of. Yeah, you have a spirit, but it doesn't stay trapped in your body until you die. This is something I hope to make evident. These bad gods, since they rule by deceptive means and not always in our interests, really could be considered the devil or devils. Now, am I saying we should resort to superstitious ways of looking at things? No. I'm saying a lot of people already do. A lot of people still do look at the world in very superstitious ways and in very mysterious ways. And we shouldn't necessarily exclude what they have to add to the conversation. And we definitely shouldn't count them out as far as their importance in considerations for our society and making things better for everyone. Humanity is waking up, and it's time we learned that even though our individuality is very valuable and our diversity is our greatest treasure, in a sense, we are all each other.
He's not me. He just plays me on TV.
Yeah, so you may wonder what I mean in saying that those who rule over us could be considered gods or devils.
Aren't they human?
Of course they are. Well, maybe not all of them. That's impossible to be sure of, but probably all of them. And effectively, it makes no significant difference. I'll get back to this in a bit, maybe. As I started to explain, I've got quite a few things I would like to talk about. For starters, I'd like to talk to you a little about spirituality. It's a complicated subject, and I'm not sure I'm any more qualified to talk about it than any religion is. But I know there are lots of people who consider themselves spiritual, but not religious. So I think it's safe to say that religions don't have the monopoly on spirituality they might like us to believe they have.
Oh, but they do. They really do.
Thanks. Anyway, some religions teach that our spirits move on to new bodies when we die. Others teach that they move on to another realm where they'll spend eternity. And yet others teach that our spirits are really gods or aliens, or that our spirits will die if we believe the wrong religion, or be tortured forever if we fail to be afraid of their particular deity. Such things can't all be true at once. So most religions discourage the learning of what other religions have to say in order to keep people from questioning the validity of their claims. Regardless, either some or all of such conflicting claims must not be true. So, what else might religions be teaching people about spirituality that may not quite fit reality?
How to be a free spirit?
Doubtful. On the contrary, religions tend to teach people how to give up their free will in favor of the supposed will of whatever deity or deities they would have you believe are in charge of your final destiny. By the way, this is Samuel. He's a bit of a creep.
I am Sam. Sam I am. I am not your Uncle Sam.
Sam's going to be playing the devil's advocate here.
God's advocate.
What I mean is that Sam will be representing an alternative point of view. You see, spirituality is generally considered a vague concept at best, which can be felt but not examined, known but not tested, taken on faith but not demonstrated. Spiritual entities are often described as ghost-like and ethereal. Their descriptions often make them seem both ephemeral and eternal. They're said to live in other realms, separate from our physical reality, untouchable by scientific instruments, and yet be able to influence the minds of mortal beings in physical bodies with physical nervous systems and physical brains in their physical heads. Some of the things about spiritual beings which may confuse people are how they can be both plural and singular at the same time, how they can be non-physical and yet be affected by the physical world, and likewise have an effect on it, and how they can be part of a living being, both within it and separate from it. able to survive the death of its body and yet retain some form of its identity and the traits which made that being unique. This is, of course, made all the more confusing by various spiritual terms, often but not always being used as if they are synonymous. In fact, I propose that a god is an entity made up of entities, like a society, but that the term God, as it has become known in modern times, refers mainly to the spiritual side of a self aware society and to mythological characters loosely based on crude understandings of such a concept. Now, this may seem a little strange to people who are used to the monotheistic idea of a god, but then keep in mind that a representative of such a society coming and identifying itself as that society would likely be seen as singular if it came in a single body. That doesn't mean that it necessarily considers that body to be the whole of itself any more than one member of one of today's secret societies above our governments would consider itself to be the whole society. They have more than one member, and yet a single member could represent them, but that would be singular. It kind of messes with our languages. So, just what is the spirit world made of? Energy, of course. Everybody knows spirits are made of energy. That does seem to be the general consensus, but I have a different theory.
That's why they glow in the dark. It's the same energy the reptilian thetans use so they can hide among us.
And they glow?
That's why you can see through their disguise at night, when they have to use extra energy to hide the glowing, and so sometimes they can't hold their shape, and so at night they just hang around with people that nobody listens to anyway. Vampires don't like the taste of them, so why should they waste their money on hotel rooms and houses when they can save it for ruling the world like they've been doing?
Okay, so would you like to hear my hypothesis?
Go for it.
The physical world is made of energy. The spirit world is made of information. We live in both at the same time. You can't have one without the other.
So when we die, Jesus saves us on a cloud drive?
Not exactly. In fact, not hardly. True, it is possible to back up what essentially constitutes the spirit of any person, but we are far from having such technology, and I'm not claiming that anyone else has it. If someone wants to believe that aliens sent copies of Egyptian pharaohs to their homeworlds to live with them among the stars, and Jesus maybe convinced them to do the same for the rest of us, that's fine with me, but I wouldn't count on it. Anyway, even if such a thing were the case, none of our religions would likely be close to being able to instruct us on how to make it desirable for such beings to have us around. Nor would our science, for that matter, at this point. And we might not even like life on their world in whatever kind of replacement body we may end up with. So, definitely not something to count on. And no, that's not what I meant.
So what do you mean about our spirits being made of information? And what do you mean about living in both the spirit world and the physical world at the same time. Are you saying that our mind and spirit are the same thing? Do you mean that if my brain dies, I'm going to be erased?
Well, you're kind of a special case. But regardless, that would be partially true. Now keep in mind that what I'm going to attempt to share may take a bit of careful explaining, since the best suited words I know of are commonly used in ways which render them pretty much useless. So I'm going to slightly repurpose those words into forms which seem to me more compatible with what appears to be at least partially understood by those who consider themselves our gods, but hidden from the rest of us for the most part, um, through, well, misuse of the words or their repurposing of the words for the general public. I've seen these patterns in languages, in cultures, in superstitions, humor, science, mythologies, the upper ranks of organized religions, apologetics, and so much more. The individual human mind in an individual human brain does die with that brain when the body's life is over. It's a huge loss to that person's spirit, but it's not the whole thing. Actually, the biggest part of the loss is probably the level of control that person's spirit had over that person's brain. I mean, when your body dies, you're going to be brain dead. You lose all control over that brain, but you'll still be you. The connection between brain and spirit, while it lasts, really is a great opportunity for a person to start their spirit on a path in a good direction. I hesitate to say the right direction because I think it's up to each of us to decide which direction is the best choice for who we are and what kind of person we wish to become. We don't stop being people when our bodies die. We simply stop being individual people with individual brains and bodies, but continue our existence as distributed spiritual entities, as established during the limited lifetimes of our individual bodies. This view is compatible with religions of practically all types that I know of anyway, as well as with science. But it reduces the stories associated with most religions to spiritual mythologies, probably used both to control demographic groups of people and to pass along encapsulated bits of understanding, which the individual minds and languages were not really well suited to explain, nor to fully comprehend within the context of a primitive society. Now, did some of this stuff come from aliens who passed it on to us and we did the best we could to pass it along? I don't know the answer to that. The brain is like a spirit factory. While matter and energy generally have to be given up to be shared, information can simply be copied and shared without loss to the entity sharing it. Our brains do a poor job of storing information, but they make lots of backup copies. Through languages and social interactions, some of the information in one person's brain can be copied to another person's brain. It's a form of mind reading, but it's mind reading we let happen. We tell someone what we want them to read of our mind, and they do the best they can to then read that. When you share your thoughts, knowledge, beliefs, feelings, reasoning, as I'm doing now, you can literally give someone a piece of your mind.
So are you trying to say that sometimes giving someone a piece of your mind can be a good thing?
Sure, that piece of your mind is also a piece of your spirit. Once given away, the original is still part of your mind and spirit, while the copy is not necessarily part of your mind, but remains a part of your spirit. It's part of your extended mind. Your spirit is what makes you you. It's not your body that makes you the person you are. That's just the actor that plays you. Your spirit is the real person. And although it starts out in your body, it's not trapped there. It grows beyond your body as you interact with society. It gets processed in the brains of other people, and some of it may even find its way back in a slightly altered form. If you copy a part of your mind onto film or paper or into a computerized storage device, it can reside there, but it doesn't live there. It remains a part of your spirit, but is no longer a part of your mind. I would say probably not even your extended mind in that case, because it's not thinking. It's not being you, it's just storing you. The original, of course, remains a part of your mind for as long as it remains in your brain. But it may degrade or evolve over time. Well, the external copy, which is not alive, may persist in a more static form. When you copy a part of your mind into another brain, it goes on to become a part of that person's mind and spirit. It is still a part of your spirit also, but no longer part of your mind. At least, not the mind that's isolated in your brain. This is, as I said, not an easy thing to discuss, and I hope that other people will share their viewpoints, that this will become something that can be talked about. The idea here is not to say that my point of view is the right point of view, but rather to say that I'm offering an understanding of the spirit world which I do believe can be scientifically tested. And more to the point, that there are ways to understand spirituality which are scientifically testable. Whether it's my way or someone else's way of understanding it, there are ways. And I think this is very important. In other words, I cannot give you a piece of my mind in an unaltered form. It becomes a piece of your mind in a form that your mind can handle. Likewise, if you share your spirit with me, that portion of your spirit which touches me will be filtered by my mind, whether I want it to be or not. And what gets through will take on a form which is compatible with my own spirit and become a part of who I am. Some information might get stored not as a part of what I express in myself, but rather as information that my brain contains and that I can draw on in making decisions. In that sense, a part of me which other people don't necessarily see may contain a part of you that you've shared with me. Something that I like about you, I may be more willing or more likely to share with others, to express openly. Then again, if it doesn't mesh well with what I am, maybe not. Those parts of my mind which I choose to share with the world make up the spirit others will see in me. Not all of the information in my head can be saved beyond the life of my body, and not all of it is worth saving. Much of it is not unique to me in any important sense, and therefore is already saved out there in the world outside of my body in one form or another. And to really save the essence of what makes me me, the important parts of me, wouldn't require re-saving that information because it's already out there. For example, I know what the answer to 1 plus 1 is, generally speaking. You probably know it too. That information is not unique to me. And passing it along isn't essential to passing along what's important about me personally. But it's a part of the mathematics that humanity has developed. Might it be that that way of looking at the world is unique? I'd say it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. And just maybe, that is an essential part of what makes humanity, a part of the human spirit. Who's to know? Right now, we've only got ourselves to go by. I would be surprised if there aren't other life forms out there which have already learned how to share their spirit with each other to the level that allows them to function as a societal entity beyond the individual body's entity. Sort of like ants do, only a little more intelligently. Or for that matter, sort of like brain cells do in a human brain, functioning as a single brain, even though each individual brain cell can do its own thinking. They're connected together by a form of communication in a sort of network, as human beings are now learning to do, to connect with each other and to become a sort of humanity network. We're using technology to augment this capability. We extend ourselves into each other and into machines, and that extension reflects back to us. And without each other, we would not be the same. So, what about immortality? Are you saying there's no heaven or hell? Are you saying there's no better or worse world waiting for us when we die based on how we lived and what we believed, or whether we served God or the devil while we were alive? Hold on, Samuel. One thing at a time. How about I start with this heaven concept? If you're familiar with the Bible, which is a common source of the word heaven in many people's vocabulary, you may have noticed that it refers to several different things, often in rather ambiguous fashion. It can be the sky, or the universe, or a mystical realm which is somehow above us, but its direction is usually considered to be up from here, regardless of the fact that we live on a rotating planet which is roughly spherical in shape. This is one aspect of what some people may mean when they talk about heaven, a place that's above us in some sense. Outer space, of course, fits that description, as does most of our atmosphere, interstellar space, and of course the huge variety of other planets, moons, asteroids, and likely other forms of life to be found separate from our planet. I meant paradise, utopia, the perfect world. Another concept of heaven is a place which is above us in a more metaphorical sense. Someplace better than here, which could include our future on this planet, if we don't turn it into some version of hell. But it could also include our future in interstellar space, our future on other planets, or even advanced civilizations out there right now. Not someplace perfect, but perhaps close enough to perfect that we wouldn't notice the difference right away if we could see it now. So you think maybe some of the gods of different religions might have been members of advanced alien civilizations? If so, do you think they just forgot about us, or maybe blew themselves up? Perhaps some are even watching us in some sense, waiting for us to develop our own valuable advanced forms of art, philosophy, science, and technology, the potential uniqueness of which might be likely destroyed by too much contact with them before we manage to get that far, since any contact with a more advanced spiritual entity would likely affect the direction which our own combined spiritual entity chooses to take. For example, if we were to witness the use of matter with negative gravity, even if not correctly understood, it would likely cause a drastic shift in thinking about such things as space travel and excavation and how they might be better accomplished, forever altering our potential of the combined human spirit to think in our own unique way about such things and to potentially develop uniquely human solutions. Solutions that societies out there don't already have. Possibly societies that may be patiently waiting for us to join them and perhaps are unwilling to risk destroying our uniqueness in the meantime. We are, after all, in a sense, an embryo. To disturb our development would be similar to parents disturbing the development of an embryo inside of its mother. Very little that they could do would actually be to its benefit. That's not to say they could never do anything to its benefit, but for the most part, they're best off to just leave it alone. Make sure that it has what it needs to develop. And that would, of course, be the environment that it's growing up in. We humans are growing up in a challenging environment. The challenge is part of what makes us what we are. Necessity is the mother of invention, so they say. If we didn't have all the challenges we have, perhaps we would fail to invent something that may be very important to the future of our own kind or even others that are waiting to see in what ways we might benefit them, not even knowing what we might come up with. Such a combined spiritual entity or societal spirit is likely the closest thing out there to matching what our ancestors knew of or at least dreamt of as deities. We have the potential to become such a thing. It is very likely that such entities already exist. Now, how likely is it that any of them have interacted with us in the past in any way, or maybe in any way currently interacting with us? I don't know. How likely is it that any such entities are even close enough that they could interact with us if they chose to? I don't know. How likely is it that if they knew about us, they would want to interact with us? Well, this depends a lot on how they think, and there again, I don't know. But I can say that we are very likely unique in at least some sense. And that uniqueness is the most valuable thing about us. Imagine early human civilizations being visited by a lone member of such an advanced civilization. It might have the means to do all sorts of things which our ancestors could have understood only as magic. If such a being had learned to think in a sense as if it were a brain cell in the brain of its society, connected by various forms of communication to the rest of that super brain, could our ancestors even have understood an explanation of such connectivity? Would our ancestors have understood concepts like we are one and yet I am many? I mean, think about it. You, whoever's watching this, are connecting with a piece of my soul, my spirit, my personality right now. In a sense, we are one. And yet, my brain is made out of several brain components, and each of those components is made out of many, many brain cells, not just the neurons, but also the glial cells, which have their own separate way of thinking. I am many, whether I feel it or not, whether I recognize it or not. And we have the potential to become a very powerful, very intelligent one, with a lot slower thinking process than what goes on in any individual one of our brains, but nonetheless with the potential to be so much more intelligent. So I don't know if any of this is going to make sense to anyone watching this video, but I'm doing the best I can to explain my understanding, right or wrong. Consider it a societal brainstorm. I'm telling you what's on my mind. Throw something back at me. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I might be onto something? Have you maybe had a similar theory? Just imagine what the possibilities are out there. Like I said, would our ancestors have even understood this concept of we are one, and yet I am many? Can we even understand it now? How about a concept like, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father, yet he's up there and I'm down here? Does that sound familiar to anyone? Or other similarly foreign ways of understanding the world? Some foreign in the sense that we humans just haven't come up with them, and some of them foreign in the sense that maybe we've come up with them, but they haven't become very well known in our societies. Keep in mind that the powers attributed to a god by most ancient peoples were much more limited than what most people these days would likely accept as being worthy of such a title. And most of it has probably since been surpassed already by humanity's meager achievements. We are already gods by some of our ancestors' standards, able to do things beyond their wildest imagination. So are you saying humans were created by God, but God is just aliens? I have no more way to go back in time and check what actually happened than anyone else has, so I'm not saying what did or did not happen. The overwhelming evidence is that humans evolved right here on this planet. But that is not to say there couldn't have been some advanced society involved, which might easily have been considered a deity by our ancestors. This is, of course, speculation, but it may be one way of explaining the possible origins of some early mythologies from which our modern religions evolved. They may have, in some sense, seeded our planet with life, perhaps after throwing a smaller planet into it, which might have resulted in the formation of our moon and maybe supplied the water for our oceans and some portion of our planet's dirt and core and atmosphere. Perhaps they visited at a few key points in time to tweak our evolution, which eventually resulted in our human form. This would not be inconsistent with the first creation of Adam in the first chapter of the Bible's book of Genesis. I suppose a lot of people haven't noticed that there seem to be two separate creations of Adam in the book of Genesis. The second one is in chapter 2. Maybe these beings, if they existed and if they did interact with us, even gave humanity a portion of their own spirit at one point in time, such as language, for example, or culture. This might explain the fact that Adam was still around 900 years after having done something that, by at least some interpretations, he should have died in the same day as having done. Maybe Adam was a society. I would say it's much more likely that Adam, which basically means man or mankind, was not representative of a single human, if there's any validity to the story, but rather humankind and humanity, depending on which creation of Adam is being looked at. There again, it could be completely mythology. I don't know. But there are people who think that it is very valuable and people who believe that there has to be some truth behind it. And I don't think we should just dismiss their concerns and their ideas out of hand without giving them as much careful consideration as we can. If there is a way that we can fit it into a possible reality, then we should at least acknowledge it is possible. Because we don't really know what the past held. And I hope that someday those people who take the word of some deacon or priest or whatever, that this book is the word of the all-powerful deity who created us and our universe, that they'll learn to take that statement of fact as statement of opinion and recognize that it's not God himself telling them this. God's not saying it's God's word. People are saying it's God's word. Nonetheless, we need to learn to respect each other. We need to learn to find what's valuable in what each other does believe, because sooner or later, most of these religions around us will probably evaporate in one form or another, maybe all of them. And I don't think that they are completely without anything beneficial to offer us. Sure, they've done a lot of damage. That doesn't mean we should, so to speak, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because the kid got dirty doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to live. Religions may have started out for various reasons, but I think most people can see that there has been at least some element in at least a lot of religions of trying to help humanity to become better, trying to help people do a better job of being moral beings. I don't think very many people would dispute the idea that religions were among the first entities to document, to write down moral codes, to say these are the things we think are right, or as the case may be, these are the things that God told us are right. But regardless, to actually document it, to actually say this was important enough that it should be recorded and it should be maybe kept a little more stable than it has been being passed down by word of mouth from person to person. Consider this. In the second book of Genesis, second chapter of Genesis, in this second creation of Adam, if that was in fact the creation of humanity, if it was in fact spiritual entity being in a sense breathed into Adam, and the spiritual entity consisted of information such as linguistic information, perhaps a language developed for humans, or perhaps a language that predated humans. Imagine if beings from elsewhere had taken the time, had had the patience to wait for us to evolve, maybe accelerating our evolution a little, but even then, it would have taken a long time. If they went through all of that for whatever it is they thought they were going to get out of it, or maybe just for our sake, this would really be, in a sense, a God creating us. Not in the same sense of, like, Thor, the god of thunder, created us, or, Zeus, the god of lightning, created us. Nonetheless, there's no need for us to make fun of it. It does that to itself. But we can find some value in it if we look for it. And some possible traces of what may be some verification that this may have been a possibility. I mean, consider if a language was made for us, it would have probably been a very simple language, at least to start with. Now, I can't guarantee that, but I would think, if they didn't want to mess too much with us, they probably would have, not wanted to give us the whole language. Let us work some of it out. Even more sensible would be to simply give us a language that they already had, or something that they at least could easily figure out how to use. But that wouldn't necessarily include names of all of the animals on our planet, or the plants for that matter, since our evolution would have been happening on our planet, not where these beings were from or where they were spending most of their time. So it would make sense then that in Genesis chapter 2, God asked Adam to name all of the animals of earth, since such animals would have evolved here and not likely have had names in any language developed prior to the evolution of life on this planet. Again, this is speculation, but it is reasonably consistent with the stories passed down through many cultures. So you're saying God really did make the Earth and the Moon, but from a couple of planets that already existed? It's one possibility. Such a collision could also have happened without any intervention, and we can be quite certain that many collisions leading to the formation of our solar system as we know it did in fact happen without any intentional guidance. This is how physics works. This is consistent with physics as scientists have gotten to know it through countless tests. And it is a much simpler explanation than anyone having planned the finer details of the positions of every rock and stream and so on. In fact, the simplest and probably most likely explanation is that nobody really planned any of what we see around us. But we can't just rule out somewhat reasonable possibilities. And we shouldn't really just rule out any possibilities. We are, after all, thinking beings. Even unreasonable possibilities might have been the case. And there's no harm in brainstorming and doing a little exploration of what could have been, if nothing else, for the sheer entertainment potential of it, for the works of fiction that we could provide for future generations to read or to view in motion pictures, maybe even for movies that we could make that might someday be watched by whatever it may have been that did get involved in our creation, in our development, in our evolution, if such a thing exists.
So if the Earth and Moon and the rest of our solar system were all formed from stuff that was part of our universe, how did the universe get here?
Well, first off, consider the redundancy of that question. If our universe got here, does that imply that it came from somewhere else? If so, how did it get there? The answer to such a question is simply that here was in its path, and now was when it intersected with this part of that path, but that's probably not very helpful.
No, it's not. What I meant was, where did all the stuff come from?
The stuff around us is all made of energy. Most of the energy in space as we know it seems to maintain some sort of balance, but virtual particles show up as momentary disturbances in that balance, which generally vanish shortly after they appear, likely due to the same overall stability which kept them from taking a detectable form sooner. The extreme gravitational forces of a black hole can even pull light back in before it's able to escape. But such a situation also allows some of the virtual particles formed to be ripped away from their stabilizing counterparts and remain as recognizable wave particle disturbances coming from an otherwise empty part of space. In other words, appearing to come out of nothingness. Although we know that that's not exactly the case. That, in a sense, this is how a black hole evaporates. And I would take this even further to say that um, this is the nature of space in the area of the omniverse in which we are familiar, according to my understanding. If a large enough volume of such space were to be left otherwise empty, either by nearly all matter falling together or by nearly all matter flying apart, we would be left with a region of space where virtual particles would be so common as to interact with each other before they could melt back into the fields from which they came. If you can imagine such a space starting with no matter at all, or at least nearly no matter, then you should be able to see how even the tiniest disturbance could have started a chain reaction of matter formation, which could have then fallen together to cause a big explosion of some type, or formed an immense super black hole, perhaps with a negative gravity or some other such trait which may seem strange to us, from which everything we know could have emerged as particles escaping from virtual particle pairs near its event horizon, and eventually as stars and planets form from such particles. Astrophysicists have worked a lot of this stuff out, but the actual origin could be any a bunch of different things. I can't take the mystery out of all of it, nor would I really want to, because after all, our universe is just one. And there probably are other universes either out there now or out there sometime in the past or future. And maybe someday we'll even find ways to travel to them or interact with them in some way, or to take advantage of properties that our universe could have had if it had been different. We may be able to, in some sense, alter little pieces of our universe. Is that dangerous? Yeah, probably. Should we be careful with it? Absolutely. But you look around at all the different things happening in our universe, and you look at the power of a super black hole at the center of a galaxy and things like that. It is really hard to imagine us tiny little human beings doing anything anywhere nearly as dangerous as a lot of what's already happening out there now without our intervention. Now, who knows? Maybe some other advanced civilization out there messed around with such things, and now their world is a supermassive black hole, and they're not around anymore. Could happen. Which is why I say, yeah, we should be very careful. That doesn't mean we shouldn't learn. A child learning to walk has to take some risks. That doesn't generally include jumping off of a really high place. It's dangerous enough just to get up and walk. They fall down, but they learn. But the fact that it's dangerous to begin that process of learning to walk and they could fall and get hurt has not stopped humanity from eventually getting to the point where we build aircraft and we build spaceships of a very primitive sort. And we have people living in orbit around our planet. Scientists exploring the world from a microgravity environment in a space station that we humans built. There is so much in this universe to learn. Again, I don't have all of the answers. But I do hope that other people will understand what I'm trying to get at in saying that my brain can't possibly come up with all of the answers and couldn't hold them if it could. But I'm sharing a piece of myself so that others can use what I've figured out, just as I have used what others have figured out through videos I've watched and books I've read and interactions with other people and talking to people about my own ideas and hearing back from them what they think of them. This one societal brain cell inside of my head recognizes that that's what it is, that it is one cell in a huge brain that's mostly asleep right now. Potentially 7 billion connected brain cells. Can we do it? What can we figure out if we do? So yeah, where did it all come from? I would say I think the most likely of where it all came from is information. That single bit of information in a substrate that reacted in a certain way to that bit of information, and that everything that's come out of it since then has been a result of how it interacted with that initial bit. And if we were right at the center, it would probably all look really symmetrical. We're not. And I highly doubt that the center of what we see as our known universe, if we could even figure out where that center might be, would be the center of where that initial bit came from. Now, was that bit a god? Well, I mean, in the sense of being our creator, you could probably call it one, but it's quite a stretch considering the sorts of definitions that people usually give to the term God. I wouldn't go as far as to call it that. So is that how it all got here? I don't know, but it's one possibility. Then the God of the Bible is just as possible, right? Not really. The God of the Bible isn't exactly even one God. It's a mishmash of entities from various mythologies, going by many names and many descriptions, conceptually evolved through retelling and rewriting and altered practically beyond recognition through translation between incompatible languages and cultures, too far removed from each other in time and understanding to retain much of the original spirit of what it used to represent. We'll probably never know the whole truth, but we can at least admit when it looks like we're wrong and when we simply don't know. Failing to understand, to learn, to seriously consider such possibilities has been responsible for the worst periods in human history, or so history tells us. I've never liked history because too much of it is fabricated and passed off as true. But at least people acknowledge that history was written by humans and should generally be taken as stories presented as fact rather than as actual fact. Might be some fact in them, sure, but we don't actually know, and we know that we don't know. Much of what many religious people call fact was not even originally presented as fact. And I think most of them know this to be the case, but they often are too easily convinced which parts to take which ways, counting those parts deemed historical or prophetic by some other fallible human with questionable motives as God's word, even to the point of forgetting that if God really did speak our world into existence, as many theologians claim, the whole world around us would be God's word, and a much more reliable source of what that creator intended than any book could possibly be. Also, with all the disagreement among religions and supposedly good gods having been said to have done things we would call evil if anyone else did them, isn't it safer to treat all religious claims and religious texts as highly suspicious and cautiously look for the good in them, using the world around us people as a guide, rather than taking the word of those who would call themselves our masters? But we can serve God without being slaves. If you're right, then there may be gods out there who really just want us to grow up and learn to tell the lies from the truth and good instructions from bad ones. Perhaps that's exactly what the good gods out there are waiting for enough of us to learn. If humanity once chose to partake of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, rather than simply doing what we were told like good little willing slaves, perhaps we are simply considered not safe to have around until we learn to cultivate the seeds of that fruit in our own spirit and become as gods with our eyes opened to the truth of how to tell good from evil, rather than just taking someone's word for it, which is which. Perhaps we're under quarantine until we cure ourselves of these lie-filled religions which have infected us. Maybe the real evil spirit in this story is us, and we're merely having to grow out of it before the inhabitants of the heavens will feel safe to join us as a baby deity amongst cautious aging gods who have lived through many mistakes and learned well the price of carelessness. I don't know. But I know these are things that we need to think about and to ask ourselves. So you think your way, I'll think my way. We'll think our way. They'll think their way. But keep in mind that gods or no gods, we're likely not alone in this universe. At the very least, we're not even alone on this planet. And other intelligent life may well evolve on this planet in our future. Maybe while we're still here. Maybe long after humanity has all left this planet. Or after some of us left and the rest of us wiped each other out. Or who knows? Nobody's likely to welcome people into their society who are more interested in collecting their unearned reward for teaching others a particular mythology than in making the world they live in a better place to live.
But if religious people are spreading a message of love, doesn't that make the world better?
Unfortunately, too many people see suffering everywhere and respond with, "God loves you, take my word for it, or you're going to hell." So I'm asking people to try something new. Stop waiting for more signs from God. Stop preparing for the trip to a realm that might not exist. Recognize that your immortality depends not on anything mysterious, but on simply sharing the best of yourself, which others will gladly share as well, just like they learned from you to do. Think about it. If one person learned enough from me to continue the work I started in trying to make a better future for humanity, I live on through that one person, because my positive effect on the universe continues through that one person. If more learn from that one, my spirit will outlive that one as well, at least in some form. This is not eternal life, but it is the closest thing to it that we're guaranteed a shot at. This is testable. This is immortality. It is getting out of being inevitably mortal. Sure, our bodies are mortal. That's only a part of us. This immortality is plainly visible to those who take the blinders off and simply look. It's not a mystery. It has simply been kept hidden from us by keeping our focus on something unattainable.
So it's a battle of good people against bad people. Can we win without becoming the bad people?
There's good and bad in everyone. The good will outlive the bad if the bad doesn't kill us all. Those who wish to bring about fulfillment of end of the world prophecies may get their way and kill us all, destroying what may be our only chance in any world. So instead of joining the well-intentioned but unhelpful masses in praying for angels to end all the suffering, take the job. Answer the prayer. Be the angel. Help end what suffering you can help end personally. Help make a better future for the people who will have to survive in this world when you're gone, and for the ones who live with you now. And encourage others to do likewise. Meanwhile, look for the good in humanity and help it spread. Nurture the spirit of goodness, and the evil spirits will be healed by it and become better than they could have otherwise been. This is what a Holy Spirit would do if it existed. Can such a spirit grow in humanity? If it does, perhaps then the gods will come and introduce themselves. Or perhaps we will finally venture beyond our own solar system and introduce ourselves to them. Either way, when humanity meets whatever advanced beings are out there, we are likely to be judged. The real question is, how would beings much different than ourselves judge us? As potential benefits to have around, or as too selfish and superstitious to be of any value? Will we be welcomed into the community of heaven, or cast into the ocean of fire we call our sun? What would you do with us if you were in their position? If you believe in a God, what does your God's track record suggest it might do? Consider the possibilities, and then ask yourself, not what can God do for me, but what can I do for God? Well, now you got me thinking. I mean, you can't do anything for God. He's all powerful, right? But then again, if that was true, doesn't his word say it's true? Of course, you said, yeah. Okay, the Bible, written by people. They call it God's word so they can control people. And maybe some of them because they believe it is. But if God was really all powerful and really wanted us all to believe he exists and he is a certain way, would he have any trouble convincing us? I guess not. So, you make a good point.